This is Radio 2, in tune with you on 433 and 330 meters medium wave and on stereo VHF. And now we present the third of four programs as part of the Leading Ladies series, first broadcast in 1977. This week, Vanessa Lee presents one of the most popular of them all.
Of all the celebrated leading ladies in the British musical theatre and the few great stars in British musical films, one of the most celebrated is Jessie Matthews.
Over my shoulder goes one care, over my shoulder goes two care. Why should I cry? It flew above. I'm free at last and I'm in love. Over my shoulder goes three cares, over my shoulder goes four cares. Bye-bye to trouble, it's gone beyond recall. Over my shoulder goes it all.
The British film magazine Picture Goer once said in a burst of, well, I'm not sure if it was honesty or masochism, one of the worst arguments in the past for the British film has been the British film. Maybe Britain felt it didn't need a film industry. We had, and I think we have, the greatest theatre in the world. One of the most brilliant aspects of this theatre was its musicals, its revues, and its performers in these fields. Then along came talkies, and the Americans developed this incredible thing called the movie musical, and a whole new art form was born. Britain still lagged behind. But they decided to make a film of a stage musical called Little Tommy Tucker, which was about broadcasting, something the British were superb at. They called this film Out of the Blue, and they persuaded one of the West End's youngest and most glittering musical stars to appear in it, a Miss Jessie Matthews.
Out of the Blue was a disaster. It should never have left the stage, and neither, I felt, should I have. It seemed that I, too, was a disaster. The people who made movies assured me my face was a mess, which is hardly comforting when you're aware that this face, this mess, is going to appear something like 20 feet tall in a close-up. There's a gap between your teeth, they said in tones of horror. They filled it with a mortician's wax. And that turned-up nose, those eyebrows, they've got to come off. And they did. A make-up man removed them with a razor. They straightened my offensive tilted nose with daubs of black beneath it. They streaked my face with white to fatten it. Then they said I wasn't photogenic, and I would have been the last person in the world to disagree with them. What stared back at me from my mirror looked like one of the less attractive members of the Dracula family. I, Jessie Matthews, was a total disaster.
And so a major international film star was born.
I would dare anything for one little kiss from you. If you'd care, I would bring the earth and its treasure to serve your pleasure. I would reach for the moon, anything I would do. I'd buy you the fun and the stars one by one for one little kiss from you.
For 10 years, Jessie Matthews sparkled her way through a series of the best musical films Britain ever made. She became our top box office attraction in America.
I'll be happy making you glad. I'll be sorry when you are sad. Let me give my happiness to you. Please do. Oh, the sunshine here in my heart. Take it, keep it, just for a start. Let me give my happiness to you. I can do without it just a little while. I'll be happy when you smile. Don't ever doubt it, we'll win through. Take it from me, please do. I'll be happy making you glad. Can't be happy when you are sad. Let me give my happiness to you.
No one but Jessie Matthews could have played Susie Dean, the talented soubrette heroine in the film version of J.B. Priestley's great novel, The Good Companions, because no one but she possessed, in fact, the incredible talent, the theatrical magic and star quality that Susie Dean had in fiction. And her film version of Evergreen, one of her big West End stage successes, is regarded as one of the classics of the British film musical.
When you've got a little springtime in your heart, you can laugh at all the wintry winds that blow. Though December comes your way, for you the birds will sing, and buttercups come peeping through the snow. You'll be young, you'll be in love your whole life through, just as young and more in love than at the start. And each happy scene will be evergreen as the sweetest morning in June. When you've got a little springtime in your heart.
And all of that is merely some of Jessie Matthews, the film star. But she's always regarded herself primarily as a theatrical performer.
I was very much a stage artist as far as I was concerned. The West End was the beginning and all of my life. I sometimes think I wouldn't have achieved the West End quite so soon if I hadn't been born there. I was born at the top of Windmill Street, and you can't get closer to Shaftesbury Avenue than that, can you? I always knew my name was going to be up there in lights, when I didn't know. But I knew. This used to cause an awful lot of atmosphere with the other chorus girls, because if they were at all unpleasant to me, I used to say, "You're being very stupid, you know, because one day I'm going to be a star, and one day you may need help," which of course must have been infuriating to them. But I was so serious about this, and I couldn't see why they couldn't see that I was going to be a star. It was just a matter of time, of reaching an age when I'd be presentable, say 17 or 18. I was about 15 when I was telling them all this. And you know, I was 18 when I was starring for Charlot.
Honeysuckle grows and the common wild roses journeys in. Come and spend all your autumn days when you can hear the breeze kissing all the oak trees. It's all so peaceful, the ivy through the old walls clinging, the birds in all the treetops singing. Listen to the brook with the timid old rook too. Journey's end, all the world there seems to blend. You will find the bluebird there. Happiness is everywhere. So come along, all of you, come to Journey's End. Honeysuckle grows and the common wild roses, Journey's End. Come and spend all your autumn days where you can hear the breeze kissing all the oak trees. All so peaceful, the ivy through the old walls singing, the birds in all the treetops singing. Listen to the brook with the timid old rook through Journey's End. All the world there seems to blend. You will find a bluebird there. Happiness is everywhere. So come along, all of you, come to Journey's End.
Actually, I was a veteran by this time. I was dancing when I was 10. My sister Rosie, who was my greatest fan and the greatest encouragement in my life, used to tell everyone how wonderful I was. I was the best dancer in England, according to Rosie. And actually, this was very good for me because I was a timid child and needed this kind of encouragement. I used to be terribly embarrassed by Rosie's outbursts of what a genius I was, but in its way this brushed off on me. Rosie gave me a sense of my own ability. The first thing I ever did was in Bluebell in Fairyland, but I was the principal ballerina, if you please. The next year at Kennington in Dick Whittington. My sister Rosie was furious because there was another child in the show who had a solo dance as a cornflower in a cornfield. Personally, I thought she was marvellous and would have loved to talk to her. But Rosie sailed into the people who were looking after this other girl and really told them off. "How dare you," she said. "My sister Jessie is the star of this show. You can't have two ballerinas." We were both 10 years old. We were rival ballerinas. But this weird jealousy that started up between Rosie and the other little girls' faction prevented us ever getting together. But we did manage it, eventually. 20 years later in New York at a party, we rushed across the room and hugged each other. That other little girl who, according to Rosie, wasn't a patch on me as a dancer, happens to be Dame Alicia Markova.
Everybody step to the syncopated rhythm. Let's be going with them when they begin. You be saying, "Yes, sir, the band is grand. He's the best professor in all the land." Listen to the pep that emerges from the middle of the jazzy fiddle under his chin. Oh, what music! The clarinetter could not be better. Hear that strain? I don't know just what it is, but it's great. They simply ruin it. Look at 'em doing it. Come, come, don't hesitate. Everybody step if you want to see a glutton when it comes to strutting over the ground. Wait till you see my little sweetie and me. Step, step, stepping around. But it's great. They simply ruin it. Look at 'em doing it. Come, come, don't hesitate. Everybody step if you want to see a glutton when it comes to strutting over the ground. Wait till you see my little sweetie and me. Step, step, stepping around. Step, step, stepping around. Step, step, stepping around.
Living in the West End, my father worked in Berwick Market. We always knew well in advance what was going on in the theatre. Danny O'Neill, who was C.B. Cochran's stage director, knew that I was a dancer, and even though I was only a kid, had appeared in a few pantomimes. He told my father that Cochran was auditioning for a new revue and that if I went along, he'd push me to the fore. Well, I auditioned, and Cochran offered me a little part. I said, "Well, I don't know about that. A little part. I'm used to playing leads." I think Cocky was a bit stunned by this. A child declining to work for him. Where exactly had I played these leads? Stoke Newington and Lewisham, I said. So he called me down into the auditorium and said, "Supposing I give you a little spot as a chicken in which you can do a little song, and I'll cast you as one of the 8 notes. Those 8 notes were do, re, mi, etc. I became me, actually. Well, I didn't think much of that offer either. So he told me to go home and ask my parents about it. And so I went into Cochran's Music Box Review, for which Irving Berlin had written the music, and in my little solo spot as a chicken, I sang his Michigan. When I went into my first West End shows, though I was too young at first to realise it, I went to work for 2 of the giants of the musical theatre, 2 of the greatest impresarios of their time. No, of all time, I think. C.B. Cochran and André Charlot. I think really and truly, Charlot was far more artistic than Cochran. Cocky had the flair of the showman's drum, the splash, the colour. If Cochran had 12 chorus girls for a number, he used 12 chorus girls. Charlot would look at the stage and say there are far too many girls there to do their best. He had 12 girls too, but he'd use 8. And the girls would alternate night after night. It not only kept them all interested, they could show themselves off to better advantage. But Cocky would push them all on together. The fact that they didn't have space to dance never entered his head. Douglas Byng summed them up perfectly. Charlot, he said, made stars. Cochran turned them into planets. Well, in a sense, that's what happened to me. Charlot made me a star.
They were pretty as they could be, in a skirt and jumper way. One was all a young girl should be, but the other rather gay, and their only cause for quarrel was a very simple one, just that one had all the morals, and the other all the fun. The bad little girl took the good little girl to dine at a place she knew. She had some port of the cheaper sort, and the good girl drank some too. Said the good little girl, enough I've had, I am not used to wine. For the good little girl felt rather bad, but the bad girl, she felt fine.
One major difference between Cocky and Charlot is that Cocky would have razzle-dazzle scenery, the best clothes, elaborate sets, lovely, lovely music, but he would clutter. Charlot would simply have his artist standing with a beautiful backdrop, lovely lighting, superb orchestrations, but he would show his performer off more clearly, really. He said to me once, when you've got a beautiful artist and a beautiful song, what more do you want? Nothing, really. And Charlot made such stars, Jack Buchanan, Beatrice Lillie, Gertrude Lawrence, to name a few.
Parisian hero, society's hero, the lord of the day, the Rue de la Paix is under your sway. The world may flatter, but what does it matter? They'll never shatter your gloom profound. Parisian hero, your spirit's at zero, divinely forlorn, with exquisite scorn, from sunset to dawn. The mirror is calling, your star will be falling as soon as the clock goes down.
My first review for Charlot was London Calling, and I became the leader of the chorus, a position of which I was very proud. Mine was always the last high kick as we made our exit, and the critics frequently mentioned the girl with the bang who led the chorus, and you can't miss her because of her high kick. I was proud of those notices, and I understudied Gertie, especially Parisian Pierrot.
Parisian hero, your spirit's at zero, divinely forlorn, with exquisite scorn, from sunset till dawn. The limbo is calling, your star will be falling as soon as the clock goes round.
Gertie Lawrence was a frightening lady, very grand and elegant. But she did have a magic, absolute magic. She didn't sing well, she sang out of tune. She was an inferior dancer, but she had an allure. Yes, allure is the word for Gertie. Parisian Pierrot was a number in which she had to dance and sing. A most artistic number, but not an applause-getter. She had to paint her face dead white for it, and I personally would have given it to another girl to do. Well, Gertie played up where this number was concerned. She would send the costume up for me to go on for her. Then she'd change her mind. I would have to wipe off the dead white makeup, put my normal makeup back on, get my costume back off the girl who was replacing me, and scramble to my next entrance. Time and again she did this. One night her dresser brought the costume up, and 5 minutes later came and got it back. Then minutes later, back came the costume. And 10 minutes after that came the dresser again to take it back to Gertie. 4 times this happened. Quite unforgivable, because it meant I couldn't go on and do my own work. Then I blew my top. I said to Gertie's dresser, the next time I get into that costume, I stay in it. And I told her what Gertie could do with herself. That costume stayed in my dressing room, and I went on in Parisian Pierrot for 6 months in New York, although my name never once went into the program for it.
You were meant for me, and I was meant for you. Together on life's tempestuous sea, we'll paddle our love's canoe. We'll sometimes disagree, true lovers always do. It won't matter, you see, if you love me. For always I'll love you.
Gertie got pneumonia in America, and I replaced her, and I found myself in trouble. I'd had quite a success, but suddenly Joyce Barber arrived to take over, and I was dispatched back to the chorus. Joyce was a lovely performer, but she was all wrong for this show because Joyce is a comedienne. I had to teach her a lot of the routines, and I helped her all I could. But I was in despair about this. I was back in the chorus dressing room, and the girls were anything but friendly to me. On one occasion I burst into tears, and one of them said to me, "Serves you bloody right, getting above yourself and demanding more money. Who do you think you are?" This was the first I'd heard of it. I really was a pretty innocent kid, and eventually I found out what all this was about. Gertie's manager had invited me to come to his hotel to hear his gramophone records. Now, I was a busy girl. I spent my days taking ballet lessons, tap dancing lessons, singing lessons. I didn't have time to go and listen to someone's records. I suggested in my innocence that he brought them to the theatre. He wrote to Charlot and said I was behaving very grandly and demanding more money. $250 extra, as a matter of fact. So, Charlot, to teach me a lesson, dispatched Joyce and returned me to the chorus. But George White, the big American producer, was out front one evening, came backstage afterwards to see me and said he couldn't understand why I'd been replaced. He wrote and explained it all to Charlot, bless him, and I was reinstated, which actually made everything worse for me. Joyce stood down, and the principals, B. Lilly and the others, were furious. Here was I, a mere chorus girl, playing the principal parts again, while Joyce the star was ousted. Do you know, the only person who was kind to me and who really understood was darling Joyce Barber herself.
Girls with golden hair seem to have a flair that makes a kind old gentleman respond. Since the world began, every gentleman is just a man who's gentle to a blonde. The most neglected girls in town are those with hair of black or brown, 'cause gentlemen prefer blonde. The red-haired and the sweet brunettes make very lovely household pets, but gentlemen prefer blonde. A curly head of yellow without any sense can always make a fellow pay all the expense. A girlie with a golden crop can take a Scotsman out to shop, 'cause gentlemen prefer blonde.
I'd been understudying and replacing Gertrude Lawrence for so long I'd never become Jessie Matthews. I suppose in one sense I was the perfect understudy, in that I was giving someone else's performance. It was Maisie Gay who sorted me out. Gertie always worked with a fan or a chiffon handkerchief. Without these I didn't know what to do with my hands. Maisie made me leave the fans and things behind. "Put your hands behind your back, Jessie," she said, "and every time you look up to the audience, see a big pair of eyes and a fringe. That's all you can see from out there." So I put my own face out there in front of me in the audience. I sang, as it were, to myself, and in this way, whatever the personality of Jessie Matthews was, started to come through.
I used to love to hear you call to me. With will, I know he meant the world and all to me. And the sun had gone to rest, I could hear you from your nest. You used to whistle tenderly, and when the moon would see above the branches of the trees above, you would sing your plaintive little melodies of love. Now the
When I returned to England and went back to Charlot, I was put back into the chorus. Charlot was disciplining me. It was difficult to take, but I took it. One bit of discipline I used not to possess was punctuality. I lived round the corner from the theatre, but I was constantly running in late. One day at rehearsal, late as usual, I slipped in on the end of the chorus line, and Charlot ordered me out of it. "Go and change," he said. "Be in my office in 10 minutes. Oh, my God, I thought, this is it. I've done it once too often. I'm fired. I ran up the stairs and wept in the dressing room. "Served you right," the other girl said. "Your own darn fault." I crept along to Charlot's office, and I could hear people laughing in there. I knocked and went in, and there were all the new principals for his new review: Dorothy Dixon, Peter Haddon, Edmund Gwen, and Henry Lytton Jr. Charlot said, "Come in, baby." He always called me baby and handed me a script. "Now," he said, "don't you ever dare be late again." Charlot not only made me a leading lady, he made me the most punctual leading lady in the world. I've tried never to be late for anything since the day he handed me that script for his 1925 review, and Charlot worked me hard. For 6 months we were on tour doing a new review every week, for 4 weeks each week in the big provincial towns like Glasgow, Manchester, Birmingham and Cardiff. I married Henry Lytton Jr., with whom I worked in those reviews, and in the 1926 review, when Charlot made me a leading lady in my own right.
By steadily avoiding anything that's rash, we contrived to save up a little bit of cash.
We didn't buy a motor car as others might have done.
Unlike the rest, we've invested in a property designed to give us fun.
Sitting beside you on a silly little hill, I never could be bored or vexed.
Sitting beside you, there's a silly little thrill in guessing what will happen next.
Though it meant a lot of sacrifice,
Now at last we've got our paradise.
Here this hill that we've annexed, and I'll bet at sunset, even later on, I'll still be sitting beside you on a silly little hill.
Charlot's 1926 review made me a star. At the end of the show, I remember standing on the stage at the Prince of Wales Theatre and had the extraordinary experience of having flowers thrown at my feet. Women unpinned their corsages, men took the flowers out of their buttonholes and tossed them onto the stage. They're mad, I thought. And then that review went to America and into the old Carol Vanities, which was a review of theatre with nudes all over the stage. And that same review that had incited the West End audience to throw flowers and cheer provoked the Americans to tossing pennies and booing. They're mad too, I thought. And it was precisely the same material. But that sort of thing is a marvellous leveller, you know. It's hard to be big-headed in the theatre because you never know what's coming up next. In America, I had a cable from Cochran, "Do nothing till you see me." So I saw him immediately I returned. "Well," he said, "what a hell of a flop you've been." And that wasn't the way to greet me. I personally hadn't flopped, the show certainly had. What I needed then and there was for him to say, "Oh, you poor kid, what a tough time we've had." I'd have gone for tuppence. "You're wasting my time," I said. "I'm going shopping." "You can't," Cocky said. "You've got no money." "That's where you're wrong," I said. "I've saved £200 and that will keep me until I get my next job," and out I swept. His secretary raced after me and called me back. "Are you going to stop being rude to me?" I said. He gave me a 3-year contract. It started with one damn thing after another.
I took one look at you, that's all I meant to do, but then my heart stood still. My feet could step and walk, my lips could move and talk, and yet my heart stood still. Though not a single word was spoken, I could tell you knew that unfelt clasp of hands told me so well. You knew I never lived at all until the thrill of that moment when my heart stood still.
Cochran wasn't sure who should sing My Heart Stood Still. There were 3 of us under consideration, and Cocky wanted to hear us all before he decided. I sang first. "That's it," he said. "It's Jessie's." And I suppose it's a song I've been closely associated with ever since. One damn thing after another was the most elaborate, most beautiful review, and it was in that I met Sonny Hale, who became my second husband. We were together in this year of grace, the first time I ever worked with Noel Coward, of whom I must confess I was terrified. Sonny and I sang that marvellous song of his, A Room with a View, which to us became a very personal song. But my first experience of it was an awful one. The first time I ever met up with Noel's rather whiplash tongue. "High above the mountains and sea," I had to sing. I sang mountains. Maybe a sort of hark back to the elocution lessons my sister Rosie made me take as a kid. "How do you spell it?" Noel said. And this in front of the whole company. I spelt it. "How do you say it?" he said. "Mountains." "Well, for God's sake, sing mountains, not mountains." I felt he could have done it privately, but then Noel always wanted what he wanted immediately, and he always got it. Isn't it strange that I never recorded that? Well, see if I can make up for it now. A room with a view, and you, and no one to worry us, no one to hurry us through this dream we found. We'll gaze at the sky and try to guess what it's all about, then we will figure out why the world is round. We'll be as happy and contented as birds upon a tree, high above the mountains and sea. We'll bill and we'll coo, and sorrow will never ever come? Oh, will it ever come true? A room with a view. Sonny and I had a wonderful professional rapport. We sang well together and we danced well together. And Sonny wasn't really a dancer. He was a brilliant faker. It was as though he was doing an impersonation, he was so good. Once we were to appear at a big midnight charity matinee, and I'd brought back a brilliant dance routine from America which I wanted us to do. It had a very tricky break in it. Sonny, as usual, faked it. That won't do, I said. Take it apart, bit by bit. I made him go over and over and over it. For a fortnight we rehearsed it, and never once did he indicate that he knew that break. And at the performance, in the middle of the dance, my God, he did it perfectly. And I blew. Every step went out of my head. I faked. I spun around the stage, I made things up, and when we made our exit, I was sick in the fire bucket. And I said I'd never dance with him again. Naturally, the routine had been wrecked, but by me. I did dance with Sonny again, of course, in Evergreen, but I very nearly didn't. He was dancing badly, not bothering to practice. And at the dress rehearsal, Cocky said, Sonny, you come down tomorrow and you go through the routine of dancing on the ceiling. Jessie, you do not come in. And Sonny, if that routine isn't perfected by the opening night, the understudy gets it. Sonny did it.
The world is lyrical because a miracle has brought my lover to me. Though he's some other place, his face I see. At night I creep in bed, but never sleep in bed. Just look above in the air. And to my sweetest joy, my boy is there. It is my prince who walks into my dreams and talks. He dances overhead on the ceiling near my bed, in my sight through the night. I try to hide in vain underneath my counterpane. There's my love up above. I whisper, go away, my lover. It's not fair, but I'm so grateful to discover he's still there. I love my feeling more since it is a dancing floor just for my love.
Dancing on the ceiling was a wonderful routine. It was designed by a man named Buddy Bradley, who was a great, great dancer and dance arranger. I used to have private lessons with him. And Buddy claims that really he's the only person who's ever seen me dance. With my ballet training and Buddy's superb Negroid rhythms, the routines that emerged were really stunning. I worked with him for 7 years in films, and I especially loved the routines we did for It's Love Again, which was a film I loved anyway.
Gotta dance, gotta sing, got to have my little thing, gotta dance my way to heaven right in your arms. Gotta hum, gotta shout, got to keep my heels about, gotta dance my way to heaven right in your arms. I feel as high tonight as any kite, and I'll soon be flying out of sight. It's no spark that you've ignited, it's a great big stick of dynamite. Gotta kiss and be kissed, cross the others off my list, 'cause I can't resist your irrepressible, sweet caressable charms. Gotta dance my way to heaven in your arms.
musical I ever did was evergreen, though I had done a straight play called Jordan with Margaret Rawlings and Richard Goulden. I'm constantly amazed, by people's reactions to review performers when they go into plays and films and such. They seem to be amazed that we can act. What they never take into consideration is that in review we play very short sketches, and in a few brief lines have to establish the kind of character that it can take a straight actor 20 pages of dialogue to create. We have to do it in 2 minutes flat. It's marvellous groundwork. A particular joy for me was a musical I did with Stanley Lupino and Sonny Hale in Hold My Hand. One of the great joys of Hold My Hand for me was that Stanley Lupino insisted that I should have a lot of comedy in it. I didn't think I could play comedy, but Stanley wrote in a scene for me in which I wore baby rompers and fell all over the stage with him. I shall never forget my thrill the first time I heard the audience laugh. "They're laughing at me," I said on the first night. "It's lovely." And Hold My Hand had some lovely song and dance numbers too.
You require a lot of looking after. That's a job in which I take a pride.
Your suggestion I'll reverse. I should like to be your nurse. I can think of no one else who do for you.
So hold my hand, no matter what the weather. Just you hold my hand. We'll walk through life together, for you'll find in me that kind of a friend who will see you through to the end.
So if you'll hold my hand, we both shall walk more steadily. For understand, you hold my heart already in that dreamland where I have planned that I shall hold your hand forever.
It was after Hold My Hand, virtually, that I moved almost entirely into films. Out of Blue, the first of them, mightn't have been, well, it certainly wasn't the best film in the world. But they improved, and I started to acquire something of a reputation in America. At one period, there was a move afoot to co-star me with Fred Astaire. I'd have loved that. And let me say, because he said so to me, so would Fred. But this just wasn't to happen. I'd gone to New York to do a musical called The Lady Comes Across. Rehearsals were postponed, things were put back, and I was left hanging around with nothing to do. And an offer came to make a film with Fred. It could be shot in 3 weeks. Shot, actually, within the time I was wasting waiting for this other thing to get into rehearsals. "Oh, no," said the management, "you're under contract to us." So, that was that. One film I adored, It's Love Again, broke all box office records in New York at Radio City Music Hall.
It's love again, it's love again. I'll shout it from the housetops up above again. That state of sweet inanity that borders on insanity is love again. I feel the urge again to merge again, and melodies of love within me surge again. So if I want to rest my chin with passion on a violin, it's love again. Love is a thing that makes a bull and heifer feel just like an airy zephyr breeze. Love is an effervescent drink that makes a cockney coster think he's Viennese. It feels like spring again, I'll sing again, and be just like the vine that has to cling again. So if I wax poetic, be a little sympathetic, it's love again.
I'd been making a big all-British film in Hollywood called Forever and a Day, an episodic story that went from generation to generation, for which we'd all given our services free to raise money for the British war effort, when the offer for The Lady Comes Across was made. Well, that lady never came across. It never happened, and the sheer worry and uncertainty of it all made me quite sick, and I wound up in hospital. And that's a hell of an alternative to starring with Fred Astaire, isn't it? I came back to Britain and went into Jerome Kern's lovely musical, Sally. Only for this revival we called it Wild Rose.
Please don't be offended if I preach to you a while. Tears are out of place in eyes that were meant to smile. There's a way to make your very biggest trouble smile. Here's the happy secret of it all. Look for the silver lining whenever clouds appear in the blue. Remember somewhere the sun is shining, and so the right thing to do is make it shine for you. A heart full of joy and gladness will always banish sadness and strife. So always look for the silver lining and try to find the sunny side of life.
Over the war years, I toured for Ensa, and that's a tough life, touring in wartime. But what marvellous audiences the troops were. I sang for them my film songs because it was as a film star most of them knew me, of course.
Oh, what has happened to me? I'm the happiest one. I'm a son of a gun and I'm riding on high. Oh, what has happened to me? I'm the silliest goose. I'm a happy papoose and I'll tell you just why. Yes, I'll tell you just why. I. Singing and talking, I dance when I'm walking, and oh, how lovely it feels. Just to be head over heels in love. Can't sleep a wink and I can't even think, and I miss about half of my meals. 'Cause I fell head over heels in love. Every night I'm the mooniest one, the juniest one, the looniest one. Love made me the crooniest one. Spring has sprung, oh, tra-la-la. My heart is a flutter, I stammer and stutter, I suppose that reveals that I am high in the heavens above, head over heels in love.
I toured in Variety with my brother Eddie, and a concert tour for Harold Fielding, which was quite an experience. No elaborate sets, no razzle-dazzle scenery. It took me back to Charlot's old philosophy. All you need, Jessie, is an artist and a lovely song. Well, I had plenty of lovely songs over my career.
Everything's in rhythm with my heart. The flowers that grow and the breezes that blow seem to go with the flow of my song. And the song I sing's in rhythm with my heart. Every creature seems to take a part. The birds in the sky keep in time when they fly way up high as they migrate in spring. Even spring begins in rhythm with my heart. Makes no difference where I go, on land or on sea. All hearts are dancing with me, they understand. Everyone's in tempo, even children at play. The world is happy and gay, it's grand. Everything's in kids on the street move their feet to the beat of my song. Everything's in rhythm with my heart.
One thing I never really cared too much for was panto. I played Aladdin, and really, you know, I found that pretty mindless. Entrance lines like, "Come on, mother, you old slow coach." And then later, "Come on, mother, you old slow coach," to say nothing of, "Come on, mother, you old slow coach." What kind of dialogue is that? I never knew which entrance I was making.
Is it true, Princess, that you're going to marry Pico? I don't know, Aladdin. I can't make up my mind. I made up my mind, Princess, the moment I saw you. I said,
you may not be an angel, 'cause angels are so few. But until the day that one comes along, I'll string along with you. I'm looking for an angel to sing my love song to. And until the day that one comes along, I'll sing my song to you. For every little bird that you have, say I've got 3 or 4. The human little faults you do have just make me love you more. You may not be an angel, but still I'm sure you'll do. Until the day that one comes along, I'll string along with you.
The business of being a leading lady covers so many aspects of the musical theatre, you know, and I don't think there are really any of them that I've not worked in. Over the years, I started to move more and more into the straight theatre, light comedies at first. One of the earliest was Terence Rattigan's Playbill, which is 2 one-act plays. The first one about a couple of Shakespearean actors rehearsing Romeo and Juliet. And that Juliet and her Romeo are, well, let's say the bloom is off them. It's very fun and it was very successful. But people expected light comedy of me. The second play, the Browning version, is a different matter altogether. I played the bitter, hardened wife of a schoolteacher who'd never made a success. I think I really surprised them with that one. I toured Australia with a Somerset Maugham play called Larger Than Life, and again with Janus. I did Peter Schaeffer's 5-Finger Exercise, but what I really regard as an achievement is playing Mrs. Bransom in Night Must Fall. The young man playing Danny said to me, "I'm sorry, Miss Matthews, but I just can't get the hardness, the bitterness of this woman from you. Every time I look at you, I see this pretty face." So I got in earlier than usual the next day, put the makeup on, and went on stage and sat down. The boy came on stage and said to me, "I'm sorry, but excuse me, we're about to rehearse, and Miss Matthews sits there." "Oh, does she indeed?" I said. "Oh, my God," he said, "it's you." "Well, that's the pace you're going to get," I said, "so no more complaints about me anymore." Do you know, even my daughter didn't recognize me backstage. To star for Cochran and Charlot in lovely reviews like Wake Up and Dream and This Year of Grace. To stand on the stage and be pelted with flowers. To stand on a stage that an audience has pelted with pennies. I wonder, will that sort of theatre ever come again? I'm prepared still to stick my neck out. I did it not so long ago when I played The Killing of Sister George. People thought I couldn't do it. Those same people came backstage afterwards and said, "You were bloody marvellous." I must broaden myself still. I'm prepared to fall on my nose trying something new, something different. I suppose for me Sister George was a risky one to do because the lady was not only a lesbian, she was a radio actress whose series had been killed off. And I'd been playing Mrs. Dale on radio for years. And one of my notices said, "This wasn't the killing of Sister George. It was the killing of Mrs. Dale, and long live Jessie Matthews, the actress." Well, you can't want more than that, can you?
Over my shoulder goes one care, over my shoulder goes 2 cares. Why should I cry if you are gone? I'm free of thought and I'm in love. Over my shoulder goes 3 cares, over my shoulder goes 4 cares. Bye-bye to trouble, it's gone beyond recall. Over my shoulder goes it all.
Jessie Matthews has been reminiscing on her life in the British musical theatre. The programme was devised and written by Frank Salter and introduced by Vanessa Lee. The producer was Barry Knight. Next week, at the same time, Vanessa Lee introduces Anne Rogers, whose major stage credits include Polly Brown in The Boyfriend and Liza Doolittle in My Fair Lady. And now the time is 9.